Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Tech Talk, where today's topic is Introduction to Transportation Management. My name is Evan, and I'll be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this web conference through Teams Live events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. Today's web conference is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation, and by participating in the session using Microsoft Teams, your name, email address, phone number, and/or title may be viewable by other session participants. If you do not consent to being a part of a recorded session, please disconnect at this time. The recording will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. If you have questions for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions throughout the event. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Now let's get started. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have Nicole Gump, Senior Program Manager, and Zach Greenboss, Principal R&D Solution Architect. Nicole, over to you.
Thanks, Evan. Welcome to our session today. We are covering the standard features and functionality in the Transportation Management module in Dynamics 365 for Supply Chain Management. So let's look at our agenda for today. We will cover some standard acronyms and terminology that you will come across when working with the module. We will then cover the core constructs. And then I will be doing some business process demos in a Contoso environment. So let's get started. Starting with a couple of acronyms that you may hear when working with transportation management. And the first one is TMS, and that is our transportation management system. So when we're working in Dynamics 365, this refers to our transportation management module, which is one of our supply chain management modules, along with WMS, or the warehouse management system. The next acronym you may hear is WMA, and that stands for our Warehouse Mobile Application. You may also hear this referred to as the Warehouse App or mobile device, or simply just app. And this is the application that you download from the Windows Store onto any Android or Windows 10 device to complete transactions in warehouse management and select transactions in transportation management as well. And then it interacts in real time with the Dynamics 365 back office system. And then a few terms that you're going to hear frequently when working with the transportation management module. These next 3 terms are actually all related. And the first one is the term loads. And loads are our physical shipping containers. So think of these as the actual trucks or trailers that are coming into your dock doors and being loaded with product from your warehouse and then physically being transported over the road. The next term is shipments. So shipments are our individual deliveries to our customers. It could also be a delivery of a transfer to another warehouse or site within your distribution network. The relationship from the shipments to the loads is that you may have many individual shipments on one particular load. So think about filling up that truck, that physical container, with many different individual shipments. And then finally, the last term here is containers, and this is also related to our shipments and loads. And containers are our handling units that we create when we're doing a packing process. That would be in the warehouse management module. But you create these containers. They might be an individual package that may be shipped via a parcel carrier. They may be boxes. They may be full pallets that you've assembled as well. All of those different handling units are examples of a container. And then it also has a similar one-to-many relationship where you might have many containers that are on your shipment, and then we've got many shipments that may ultimately be on our load or our physical container that we're shipping. So that's all of our terms. Let's move to our core constructs. And the first one we just spent a bit of time talking about, the loads, shipments, and containers. So we defined those terms, and really what those are altogether comprise our hierarchy of transit. And there's a graphic that represents that here on the next slide. So I'll describe that in a little bit more detail. The next concept that we have is the mobile structure on that WMA, or that warehouse mobile application. So the structure that we have is a set of menus and menu items that allow the user who is on the application, whether that application was downloaded on a desktop, a tablet, or an actual handheld scanning device. Those menus and menu items kind of define the options that are available to the users as far as which functions they can perform. And then when we talk about carrier management, this is the ability within the transportation management module to set up and activate which carriers that you have contracts with, and also the service levels with those carriers that you are utilizing. And I've got a graphic that explains this a little bit more as well. So let's look at those. So the first graphic is that hierarchy of transit of our loads and shipments and containers. So I described this relationship previously about the one-to-many relationship. So here it is in a graphic. And if you think of this as kind of a sideways pyramid, where the top of the pyramid is our loads on the left-hand side, this graphic is showing that we have shipments within our loads. Here I've only depicted one, but there could be many shipments within this single load. And then as we move down, the middle section of the pyramid would be our middle column here of shipments. And this is depicting that within our shipments, we have another one-to-many relationship where we might have multiple containers. If we have done some sort of a packing process in the warehouse management module to create containers, or within those shipments, we may just have a one-to-many relationship with our actual sales or transfer order lines individually. And then at the very bottom of our pyramid, either within our containers or just tied to our individual order lines, we then have those individual items that we are fulfilling. And then another graphic to show an example of what that mobile structure on the warehouse mobile application might look like. And this is specific to just transportation management. The warehouse mobile app is probably more heavily utilized on the warehouse management side of our supply chain operations, but there are still some use cases for it in transportation management. So I wanted to show that here. So the user may log in to their warehouse mobile application and see this main menu that I've shown on the left. And then they may see a couple of different menu items that they can select of either transportation operations or shipping operations that they are allowed to do. If they drill into the transportation menu item, you can see that they've got driver check-in and driver checkout options. If they would instead choose to do a shipping operation, they may be doing something like transport loading, which is kind of a dock management operation. So that's just one example of what those menus and menu items might look like in a transportation management scenario. And then one more graphic to show what our carrier management setup might look like. So I've chosen this graphic here, and on the left-hand side, you can see that we've got the carrier at the top, and we've got this kind of parent-child relationship between that carrier and the service levels that they use. And so I've included an example on the right-hand side of a parcel carrier. So this is FedEx is our carrier or our parent, and then the children underneath are our service levels, and that might be ground shipping, or maybe we also use an overnight shipping service with FedEx. This also would apply to like LTL or TL carriers that you have contracted as well. So those would be set up in the same manner. All right, a few more concepts that we want to go over. So load planning and load building. So these are the two functions that allow you to create transportation loads in the system. So that top level of our pyramid, which represents our physical shipping container. If we choose to do load planning, that is a more manual process, and you will see me do that in the demos. If I instead choose to use the load building process, that is a more systemic way to set up your filter criteria and allow the system to look at all your open demand and suggest which load should be created from those order lines that need to be fulfilled. So you've got a more manual process with the load planning and a more automated or systemic process with the load building. Then when we talk about rating, routing, and tendering loads, these are three really fundamental operations to transportation management, and what they ultimately are allowing you to do is with rating, you are able to retrieve and assign a freight charge to your load. With routing, you are going to retrieve and assign a route to your load. So defining what are the segments of transport and what modes of transport are defined for the entire route. And then tendering allows you to actually assign a carrier to the load. And this would be utilized in a scenario where you do not have maybe your own fleet of trucks, or you do not have a dedicated carrier that you are using. And instead, you're creating loads, and then you are going to bid that load out to different carriers, and maybe you're just looking for, you know, the lowest cost or the quickest transport time, and ultimately you're able to accept and reject those bids from different carriers, and then select a carrier to then assign to the load. When we talk about dock management and appointment scheduling, this is allowing us to manage our trailers, those physical shipping containers that represent our loads, and our drivers who are checking in and out of our facility. So this gives us some capabilities to do some yard management and dock management activities, one of which is appointment scheduling. And the appointment scheduling allows me to actually block off time, and I can define the duration of time for when the trucks will be in a particular door or dock door at my warehouse. And so I can kind of plan out the day of when drivers will be coming and going and picking up or maybe dropping off product into my facility. And then finally, we have apportionment and freight reconciliation. So this is more of our financial piece of transportation management. Apportionment is the term that means we are allocating our freight charges that we retrieved earlier in the rating process back to our sales order lines. And then ultimately those can be passed on to the customer, or whatever we need to do with that freight charge. Maybe the company actually pays for it if you offer free shipping to your customers, or whatever the scenario may be, but it allows you to capture that charge as a miscellaneous charge on your sales order line. And then with freight reconciliation, you're able to do a match and pay activity against your estimated freight charges and then your actual carrier invoices. So we may think that we are going to have one freight charge when we do our rating operation, but that's really more of an estimate. When our carrier comes and picks up our load and delivers it, they are then going to send us an invoice that maybe has a slightly different charge. So we're going to do a reconciliation process with that freight. All right, so that is all of the terminology and the concepts that we wanted to cover. So I'm going to spend a fair amount of time going through some business process demos in the Contoso environment. But before I do that, I will stop and ask Zach, are there any questions from the first portion that I can answer?
No, I think you can jump into the demos.
Okay, thanks, Zach. So let's go over the processes that I'm going to demo, and then I will switch to the environment. So I'm going to first create a load through that manual load planning process. I'm then going to rate that load, and I'm going to route a load as well to show those two different operations. I am then going to actually do some warehouse management processing because we are going to need to kind of push our order through so that we can do the final transportation management demos, which will be on scheduling an appointment for our carrier to come pick up our load. We will then check in the driver as he shows up at our facility, and we will check out the driver as well. And then finally, at the end of that process, we'll do our final warehouse management process to confirm that that load has left our facility, and then we'll be able to do the freight reconciliation demo. So let's switch over and get started with those. So let me refresh my environment here. All right. So I have a couple of sales orders that we're going to be working with that I put into the system before the session today. So I'm going to go to the transportation management module. And let me collapse these things here. So under the planning tab at the top, you will see you've got the load planning workbench and also the load building workbench. So again, that load planning is going to be that more manual process, and the load building is going to give you the option to define some criteria and allow the system to suggest which load should be built for you. I'm going to go through the manual process so that we can talk about it. So if I open this load planning workbench, you'll see I've got a two-part form here, which should feel very familiar if you're used to working with the release to warehouse form in the warehouse management module, where we've got our open demand lines at the top. And we even have, just like release to warehouse form, different tabs for different types of orders. So sales lines and transfer lines for outbound loads, and purchase order lines, which would be if you're doing inbound load planning. We're going to work with sales orders today, so I'm going to leave it on the sales lines. And then you'll see the bottom part of the form has our loads that have already been created. So as I start to put these open demand lines onto a load, they will then move down to this bottom part of the form. So let's go ahead and start with our first process, which is just creating a load. So I'm going to use my first order line here. If you had a ton of open demand lines up here, you know, in a more real world scenario, then you would probably be using some of the filter criteria up here at the top. And that would just help you narrow down the demand lines that are displayed here to help you better manually create those loads a little bit more efficiently. So I've only got a couple of open lines here, and these are my ones that are shipping on today's date, so I don't need to include any additional criteria. But I'm going to go ahead and select the first order line, and I'm going to, at the top in the supply and demand tab, select to new load. So I'm adding this to a brand new load. And what I'm going to select here is a load template ID, the load templates really define those physical dimensions and the capacity of that physical shipping container. So these are important, and you'll see here that there are some different sized shipping containers defined. I'm going to use this 53-foot trailer because that's just the most common kind of semi-trailer size that you would see of a truck that's moving freight over the road. So when I select that, and it has my order line that I selected here, I could select multiple at one time if I wanted to, just so you're aware. And what's going to happen is I can review the information at the bottom. If I had multiple lines, this would be a summary of all those. And then I can also see the total weight and how much capacity I have left for weight and how much volume I am utilizing and how much capacity in volume I have left. A couple of things to note here, the unit that's being evaluated for weight and for volume is going to depend on the system unit you have defined in the organization administration module for volume and for weight. So weight might be pounds or it might be kilograms in your legal entity. Similar for volume, we might have different units there. But whatever you have marked as the system unit is going to be utilized here. So keep that in mind. And then also the other reason that these tabs are here for you to review as you're creating the load is because you might have a couple of different scenarios where you may hit the weight capacity before you hit the volume capacity. So it's important to look at that. So you might be shipping heavy product. And so you hit that weight maximum before you're able to kind of what we call cube out the trailer or fully utilize all the cubic space. And similarly on the volume, you may be able to fully utilize all the volume in a trailer. I may be able to put a full 26 pallets of inventory on a 53-foot trailer, but not ever hit the weight capacity. Maybe I'm shipping a very light product and it just takes up a lot of volume. So both of those things are here for you to review. And I am nowhere close to my capacity here because I've only got this one order line. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, OK, that I want to create this load. So you can see it has removed that demand line from the top of the form, and it's created my load for me down here at the bottom of the form. So that was our first process for manually creating a load. I'm going to go ahead and use that load that we created to do the next process, which is rating a load. And you're going to see pretty much every demo that I do today is going to originate from this load planning workbench form. And that is because we have got all of these actions here that provide you with direct links to anything that you would need to do with this load information as far as rating and routing, looking at related information as far as maybe picking work that was released, being able to do your transportation functions like scheduling appointments, generating any paperwork like bills of lading. All of that can be done from here. So while all of those things can also be done from the transportation management module menu here, it's just going to be much more efficient to work with all of those forms from here because a lot of them will be pre-populated with the information from the load that you have selected when you then jump to that form. And we're going to see that actually right now as we jump to under rating and routing. I'm going to use the rate route workbench. So this is a form that I can get to from that transportation management menu. But if I were to open it from there, all of my criteria at the top would just be blank and it would be asking for me to fill that in manually. But you can see that I've saved myself a lot of time here by opening this workbench from the load, and now it is pre-populating all of the information from my load for me. So I've got my origin and destination address information, my weight, volume, the LTL class. So in this demo, I'm going to go ahead and rate the shipment I'm going to say I'm going to do it LTL. I've got an LTL class here. This is obviously not a full truckload based on the capacity that we saw when we built the load. So at the top, I'm going to point out the difference here before I go through the demo of rate and rate shop. So there's two different rating options that you can do. If you rate, so the first button here, the system is going to go through, evaluate all of the rating information that is configured in the transportation management module and return the lowest cost carrier option to you. If you instead do a rate shop, that's going to return every carrier that can potentially meet this criteria, right? That can move this load from the origin to the destination. And then the user in this form would be able to select which of those carriers they want to assign to the load. So it may not be the lowest cost that you want to select. Maybe you want to use a carrier that can get it there, a day earlier, and you're willing to maybe pay a little bit more in freight for that shipping time. So that's the difference between rate and rate shop. Rate is only going to return one result to you, which is going to be the lowest cost. And that's what we're going to do here in this demo. So I just hit the rate button. It kind of looks like nothing happened, and that's because we have to scroll down in our form to see our results tab here, which is kind of the middle of the form. You'll see we do have some additional tabs below. But here in the route results, that's a little misleading. This is also rate results, but you'll see I got a total rate for my LTL shipping carrier of $15.40 US dollars. And if I want to see the details of that, I can come down to the segments and view the details. And it's going to tell me how that rate breaks out if there are multiple charges that comprise that total. So I do see that I have a base freight charge of $14.40. And I also have an accessorial charge of $100. The accessorials are charges that you can configure. They are either assigned to a carrier or to a hub. If you're using hubs and you're using routing, then you can assign accessorials at the hub level as well. This one is just tied to my LTL carrier, and this may be just a flat charge that my carrier always charges me, and maybe it's a lift gate charge or something like that. That's always going to be in addition to whatever the actual freight charge is that's being determined by mileage or point to point, whatever the rating engine I'm using behind the scenes is. So that's the detail of my charge. So that gives me the $15.40. And if I want to go ahead and assign that, I'm going to click assign in the results tab. And you'll see that it has brought up this routes form. Again, a little misleading because I haven't done any routing, but this route record is what contains not only route information, but also rate information for the load. So here you can see that it has created a route record for me, and it has filled in the rating information that I just assigned. I don't need to do anything with this form. It's just showing me that it's been assigned, so I can close it. And I can actually close out of this rate route workbench to get back to my load planning workbench. I'm going to use this other sales order line to create another load because I want to show you a separate process for routing. It's going to use the same rate route workbench, but we're just going to be talking about a different operation here. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to put this other sales order line on a different load. So I've got a new load down here, same process we used before to manually create that load. And then I'm going to go back to rating and routing, bring up my rate route workbench again. So again, I've got all my information pre-populated here. This is still an LTL load, and I'm going to go ahead and do a route operation. So let me again kind of define the difference between the different route buttons that are available on this form. So if we route, the system is going to go through the routing setups that are in transportation management. It's going to evaluate them against the criteria here in this form, and it's going to return any matching results. The other options that you have, though, is to do a scheduled route. And that would be a very similar, evaluation of the criteria and looking at the routing setups. Only this time, it is a defined frequency that you are doing the route. So maybe I'm in a retail scenario where I've got a distribution center that is shipping to stores, and I do that same shipment to certain stores multiple times per week. So maybe it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So if I do this scheduled route today on a Friday, it may be too late for me to ship this same day to my store on a Friday, but maybe I can put it on next Monday's scheduled route. So that's what the scheduled route is going to be. It's going to return to you in the results the next available scheduled route time. And then if we do the route with rate, that is your option that allows you to kind of do both functions at the same time. So if you are doing rating, but you are also utilizing the routing functionality in TMS, then you can go ahead and kind of do both evaluations here at the same time for your load instead of doing the two processes separately like I'm doing here in the demo. I've separated them just so that we can see the difference between rating and routing results. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a route. Again, might not look like anything happened, but if you scroll down, we've now got results. And here I've got a couple of different routes that were suggested to me for this load. The first one is Washington to Georgia. So if I look at where I'm actually shipping from, I'm shipping this load from Tacoma, Washington to Cleveland, Alabama. So it's telling me go from Washington to Georgia to get it close to that customer in Alabama. And my segments now are showing me the detail of that route. So this is a multimodal route. I've got a segment that goes from my own warehouse to a rail station in San Francisco. And then from San Francisco to Georgia, it's actually being put onto a truck, a full truckload. So maybe there's some consolidation happening at that rail station, and then it's being trucked all the way to Georgia. I could select that route, or I could select this other route that was suggested to me up here, which was defined as a certain warehouse shipping to certain customer accounts. That's just the way the routing guide was set up. And this one has 3 different segments on it, going from my warehouse to a hub in LA, and then from that hub to a secondary hub in Georgia, and then from Georgia to another hub that's in Georgia that maybe is not a consolidation point. Maybe that's a little bit closer to my end customer. But all of these, one is not multimodal. It's actually all being done via truckload. I'm going to go ahead and pick the one that actually has a couple of different modes of transport. And again, if I'm happy with that route, and you'll see I've got no rating information because I just did the route operation. If you did the route with rate, you would see kind of both of these pieces of information filled out. And when we do the assignment, the route record then would have both pieces of information. So you can see how this is different than the route I had earlier with the freight charge because it had the rate filled in. This time I've got the routing information filled in. And again, you can see the segment information below. We don't need to do anything with this. This is just showing us the record that was created, so we can go ahead and close it. And that is it for our rating and routing demo. So before we do the rest of the demos, which are to schedule an appointment, do our driver check-in and check-out, and reconcile our freight, we've actually got to process one of these loads. So I'm going to use this one that I created a rate for, because then we can use that for reconciliation at the end. So I'm going to go ahead, this load, and I'm going to release it to the warehouse. Again, I can just do it right from this load planning workbench. It should create some picking work for me. I'm going to kind of glaze over a lot of the warehouse management operations because this session is focused on TMS. But again, you saw me just click on the related information to find the work detail that was created. So here's my picking work. for this order. So let me see if I can go ahead and complete it just from here. I'm going to define my user. Okay, this one has to do some license plate picking, so we may have to log into the app to complete this. So let's go ahead and do that. I've got my warehouse mobile application up. I'm going to log in to outbound and do some sales picking to complete this work. And I need to go find which license plates we're going to pick from. Okay, so this is telling me, so basically I've got several different picking locations to pick all of the quantity that I need for this order. So I'm going to pick from the first location. Now it's asking me to pick from a bulk location, which needs a license plate ID. So let me go find a license plate ID. Oh, and I do not see anything there. Okay, now from CP001, it wants me to pick off of another license plate. We've got most of our storage locations in the demo data. I am in the USMF legal entity using warehouse 24, which is configured for the warehouse management. Okay, now it's asking me to pick from floor 002. Oh, floor 002. That's because I, picked a different place to reallocate that from. This was a bad picking example. We will process this. So we've got floor 002. I've got several different license plates here for my item that I could pick from. I'm just going to go ahead and scan one. And now it's going to ask me. Oh, sorry, I need to pick floor 001 now. And this has several license plates as well. I'm going to pick that license plate 24. Actually, I'm going to pick a, I can do that. I don't think this has enough quantity. It's going to ask me to continue to pick another license plate. So let me pick a couple of them. All right, and I have 24 more pieces. So maybe let me pick this license plate that has enough quantity here. Okay, now we picked from several different locations and several different license plates, and now we can put our full quantity of 96 to our bay door, which is our final shipping location. Okay, so now we've fully completed the picking process in warehouse management. So now we are at a point where if we go back to transportation management, to our load planning workbench, and I look for that load, so this is my load ending in 212. My load status is now loaded. So that tells me that everything that's on the load, all of my load lines have been picked and they are at the final shipping location. So now I can go ahead and do my other transportation management functions. So I'm going to go ahead and schedule an appointment for a carrier to come and pick this up. So from the transportation dropdown on the load planning workbench, I can get to my appointment scheduling screen. And this is another one where if I create a new appointment, you can see that it's auto-populating a lot of information for me from the load, so I don't have to do that myself. So we've got in here, you can see what it's asking me to select is an appointment rule. And the appointment rules, if I just filter for my warehouse I'm working in here, I just have one defined for my dock door one, and this is defining the duration of these appointments and whether or not you allow them to be inbound or outbound or both. So if you have separate receiving docks from your shipping docks, or maybe you have a shared dock where trailers are coming in and out, you can define that in the appointment rules. So I have a rule here that allows me to do an inbound or an outbound appointment, and it's just a duration of 30 minutes. And I can see that here because I've got this plan start date and time. And then the end date and time is 30 minutes later. Okay, so this date and time at location is going to be the time zone of the warehouse that you're scheduling the appointment for. The other start date and time is that like UTC date and time. Okay, so if everything on the appointment looks good, you can add notes in here if you would like. But what we want to do is change the status from the default tentative status to affirmed status. And then we can go ahead and when the driver arrives, we'll now be able to check this driver in because we have firmed the appointment. So let's show what that driver check-in then is going to look like. I'm going to open up this load. I'm going to generate the load list report because this has a load ID that is barcoded on it on the standard out-of-the-box report. So you can see here at the top, and it has all my load information. If I've got multiple stops on the load or multiple shipments that are being dropped off at different delivery addresses, those would all be shown on this report. So this is a nice out-of-the-box report to print for your workers on the dock. And so this barcode ID of the load ID is what I'm going to use to initiate the driver check-in and checkout. So I would print that and my user would have this. So I'm going to cancel out of this picking operation I was doing. I'm going to go back in my warehouse mobile application menu structure, and I'm going to go to the transportation menu item. And now I can see I've got driver check-in and checkout operations I can do. So if I do the check-in where it says scan ID, that is the load ID. I know that's not intuitive, but it is the load ID that it wants. I can't actually scan that here, so I'm going to do a copy paste operation to simulate that scan. But I'm going to enter it here. And when I enter in the load ID, it's going to tell me, okay, this is the total weight for the load. This is the delivery address. And I'm just going to confirm that. And I'm also going to confirm the carrier that the driver is with. And when I do that, it's telling me the driver check-in is complete. And I can now go back to that transportation appointment scheduling. And I can see that my appointment has changed statuses and it is now checked in because of that operation I just did on the app. So you can see that that app is updating the transactions in real time here in the Dynamics 365. Okay, so let's assume that, you know, our clock has started on that appointment duration now. So if I scheduled 30 minutes, that's me saying that, you know, I plan on it taking 30 minutes for that driver to, you know, lock into the dock door, for the warehouse to load up his trailer, for us to print any shipping documentation, and then, you know, seal up the trailer and for him to be able to leave the facility. So let's assume some time has passed. We've done all of those activities, and now we want to check that driver out because he's ready to leave. So I'm going to go back to the mobile app. I'm going to cancel out of the check-in and I'm going to do a check out. Again, it just wants a scan of that load ID. So with that paperwork, I can just go ahead and scan it with my handheld device. It's going to give me the same information. Here's the load ID. Here's where it's going. And it's going to go ahead and say that the checkout is complete. I can go back to that appointment one more time and you'll say, oh no, the record's gone, but it's not. This is one of the forms where we have to display the closed appointments in order to see that historical data. So if I click this parameter here, you can now see the completed appointment status. And you can always go up to the appointment history and see the full detail of anything that has happened with the appointment. There are reason codes that you can define. I know I did not use one here, but they're nice for if your driver calls once you've scheduled the appointment and maybe they're going to be delayed for some reason. You know, there's a traffic jam on the route and they're not going to be able to show up on their scheduled time. Then you can go ahead and update the appointment time and give it a reason code that they're, you know, traffic delayed. And then you would see that in the history of the appointment. So you have kind of full visibility to what's happening here. And then you also have the driver check-in, checkout details that you can review as well, which just gives you the planned start date and time. And then when we actually did it here, right, we only spent about a minute and a half between the check-in and checkout, but you would be able to compare that against the appointment duration that was scheduled. That way you can see if those are relevant times. And then we can capture some additional information as needed as well. When you check in the driver, if you wanted to capture his actual trailer number, maybe his driver's license ID, name, different things like that, you can capture all those on the driver check-in, checkout detail. Okay, so that's it for the appointment scheduling and the driver check-in and checkout. So now what we want to do is just go ahead. I'm going to confirm this load because I want to go ahead and do the freight reconciliation piece. Before I do that, though, let me generate a bill of lading because I would likely be sending this with my driver before he actually leaves. So I can do that again right from the load planning workbench. I can generate bill of lading. This may take just a second. Here's the standard bill of lading form. Oftentimes we see that customers want to modify this, with some additional verbiage. Maybe there are, some company logos or something you want to add. But here's the traditional bill of lading that you could then print and send with the driver. All right. So now I can do let me go to my ship and receive. Here I want to do the confirmation of my outbound shipment. So this is really just going to update the status of my load from that loaded status to a ship status. So this is just me as the logistics coordinator confirming that, driver was checked out and he's got his paperwork and he has left with this load. So now I see that it's in a ship status. That action of ship confirmation is the trigger to generate our freight bill. So if you remember, this was our load that had our freight estimate on it from earlier. So if I go to the related information, I can see the freight bill that was generated. So here I see I've got two different lines on my freight bill. Let me expand these so you can see. One of them has that base rate of the $14.40 from my carrier. The other one has that accessorial charge of that flat $100 charge. So this is my estimated freight, and this is what I'm going to use this freight bill to compare against my carrier invoice to do my reconciliation. So there is a way to do an automated freight reconciliation process. If your carriers were sending you their invoices via EDI, you could load those into the system and then set up some auto match batch jobs to look at those carrier invoices against these freight bills that are generated and set up some tolerances. Maybe you're okay with 2 or 3% one way or the other. Just automatically reconciling those, and you can define which accounts are used when that reconciliation happens from a financial perspective. And then if it's out of tolerance, or if you just want to do a manual matching process, which is what I'm going to do here, then you would be looking at the freight bills and the invoices kind of side by side in one form. What I'm going to do here to get the carrier invoice is to actually do this function called generate freight bill invoice directly from my freight bill estimate. And this is kind of a way for me to generate an invoice in the system without having to completely create it manually from scratch. Or, the other end of the spectrum would be to capture it automatically via like an EDI transaction. So what you can see here is that it generated a freight invoice for me. So this would be my carrier invoice. So maybe they have just sent me an email, right, that says this was my charge and it has an attachment and they haven't sent it to me via EDI. And I'm just trying to create this in the system. So I can go ahead. This has created the exact information that was on my freight bill estimate for me with the way that I just created this. but I have the option to update it, right? So maybe I'm going to go ahead and say that, oh, the carrier actually only charged me like $13.50 to move this freight. Maybe fuel was a little bit cheaper this week. And my accessorial charge is the same. So this is what my actual carrier invoice information is. And now I can go ahead and do a match freight bills and invoices function. So this would be the same form you'd be looking at even if you had an automated process, if something fell out of your tolerance and couldn't be auto matched and paid. So let me expand all of these and explain this form. It's a little bit kind of reads differently. So we've got the invoice detail here at the top. So you'll see that it has that information that I updated on the invoice. So the $13.50 freight charge and my $100 accessorial. I have not matched anything yet here in the middle of the form, but if I scroll all the way to the bottom, you can see that I've got my unmatched lines that are available for me to match to this invoice. So I would come down here, you want to have the invoice line highlighted at the top. That's my freight charge. I'm going to match that to this freight charge here at the bottom. That's my estimate. So I'm going to go ahead, I can say match, and it's going to move that from the bottom to up here. And it's going to tell me that I've got this amount remaining. So the $13.50 matches the invoice, but then I've got an additional $90 that I estimated that are going to have to be reconciled. And then I want to do the same thing for the accessorial of the $100. I'm going to come down here, find my accessorial charge, match it. And now both of my invoice lines have been matched. So I don't have any amount remaining here to match. And I can go ahead and submit this for approval. It didn't ask me to reconcile that because it was an underage. So I didn't pay as much as I estimated. So this just goes into a vendor invoice approval workflow. You have some options to automate that as well. Those configurations are in the setup of the transportation management module parameters. You will see a vendor invoice tab there that allows you to define if you want to just go ahead and automatically approve those invoices that are submitted through this workflow, or if you want somebody to approve them. Okay, so that's the manual freight reconciliation process. And that's it. That was the last of our business process demos for transportation management. So I'm going to go back to, let's bring up our slides. And Zach, I'll ask one more time. I know we've got a few minutes. Are there any questions that came up during the demos?
We had a question. Will the load planning workbench also consider returns as well?
If you have RMAs created, you could do some inbound load management, because you would have a PO of type return order that should show up under that purchase order lines on the load planning workbench.
Which one would it show up under?
Sorry, let me go back to the system here. Let me open the load planning workbench. It would be here.
Perfect. Okay. And then another question, is there a way to restrict the usage of a load template or warn the user if the goods wouldn't fit into the container?
There's not a way unless you went ahead and like customized maybe one of the warehouse management security roles to like not see all these values in the dropdown of the load planning templates. But I will say that if you pick one and you start to add order lines to it and you've exceeded the capacity either in weight or volume, you will get a warning. So, even if you glance past that form and you don't check, it will warn you, similar to how the system warns you during a packing process in WMS. If you pick a container type and you put too many items in it and it exceeds the capacity of the container, same type of warning here with the load and the load template. And I can actually, I'll quickly bring up the load template for you to see what those different. So here's that 53-foot trailer. So you can see all the things that are defined there. So the load dimensions, the max volume, max weight, and actually how many freight pieces I can put on it.
Great. And then what about, is there an option to load the carrier freight onto the item to get the correct costing? I think you might have shown that. I just want to make sure if that's the same thing where you were showing the...
Yeah, let me kind of describe how this goes all the way back, because we didn't talk about the, we didn't show in the demo the apportionment, so maybe that will help. So one thing that is critical when you are doing freight reconciliation is that you want to, on your terms of delivery, you want to enable this parameter that says add transportation charges to orders. If this is not enabled, then when you're doing all that rating and you're assigning the freight charge, when you create the freight bill, it's not going to get apportioned back to your sales order line, which is ultimately how you're going to be able to link it to the line item, right, that you shipped. So you want to be able to enable this parameter on the terms of delivery. And then let's go ahead and look at our actual sales order that was from that load that we shipped. I think it was this one here. Let me verify that it was load 212. Okay, so if we look at the financials and we look at maintained charges, this is where you'll see that apportionment. So it is captured as a miscellaneous charge, and that's where we define our, you know, in the charges code, the accounts. And you'll see that I've got the two different charges for the freight and also for the accessorial. So hopefully that helps. And when you go ahead and invoice this order, you'll see it in the voucher as well.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
I think we're good for now, based on the time.
Okay, no problem. I'm just going to quickly invoice this order. So we'll follow that last conversation through here. So I posted the packing slip for that order that we just did the freight reconciliation on. So now I've got an invoice journal that I can look at. And if I look at the voucher, we should see the freight in here. So we can see the accounts that hit. All right, so that's kind of the end to end. Hopefully that closes the loop on that full cycle. All right, well, if there are no other questions, I'm gonna bring this back up. I'm gonna bring up my contact information. Do feel free to connect with me, reach out to Zach or myself if you have any additional questions. And otherwise, I will throw it back to Evan.
Awesome, thank you, Nicole. We would like to get your feedback on today's session. I've posted a link to a short survey in the Q&A panel. We value your feedback and welcome your input on how we did today and what you would like to see in future sessions. The survey scores on a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest score possible, and we thank you for your participation in that. As a reminder, the recording of today's session will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters and a thank you to our audience for logging in and joining us today. Please stay safe and have a great rest of your day or evening wherever you are. Goodbye.